The Atlanta skyline glittered against the February night, its lights starkly contrasting the quiet struggles unfolding below. On February 7, 2025, Aisha Johnson, a 34-year-old black single mother, hurried through the staff entrance of Mercy General Hospital, her breath visible in the chilly air. Her navy scrubs were crisp, but exhaustion lined her eyes. She was late for her night shift, a rarity for someone who prided herself on precision. The babysitter for her 7-year-old son, Jamal, had arrived 20 minutes late, a reminder of the delicate balance Aisha maintained. She couldn't afford mistakes, not in a city where her race, status as a single mother, and modest income were scrutinized at every turn. Inside, the hospital hummed with urgency. Aisha clocked in, her ID badge swinging as she rushed to the nurses' station. At 34, she was one of the newest hires at Mercy General, but her reputation as a top graduate from Emory University's nursing program preceded her. She'd moved to Atlanta 6 years ago, fleeing a scandal in Virginia where she'd been fired for refusing to falsify medical records for a wealthy patient's family. The incident had cost her a career she'd fought for, but it hadn't broken her spirit. Her father, a stable hand who taught her to ride horses and stand tall, had instilled a mantra she lived by. Truth bends, but it never breaks. "Thank God you're here," Aisha called Linda Carter, the head nurse, her voice cutting through the bustle. Linda handed Aisha a chart, her expression grim. "We've got a VIP coming in. Edward Harrington. Ed to his friends. Car crash. It's all over the news." Aisha's eyebrows lifted. Everyone in Atlanta knew the Harrington name. Edward Harrington, a 40-year-old white real estate magnate, owned half the city's skyline, sleek towers and sprawling developments symbolizing wealth and power. His community housing projects, though less publicized, had sparked debate among the elite, who saw them as a waste of profit. Aisha scanned the chart. Severe head trauma, coma, critical condition. Her heart sank. She'd seen too many patients like this, rich or poor, reduced to the same fragile thread of life. He swerved to save his wife during their anniversary drive. Linda continued, lowering her voice. Clare Montgomery. She walked away without a scratch. 1 year married today. Before Aisha could respond, the emergency room doors burst open. Paramedics wheeled in a stretcher, monitors beeping erratically. A tall woman in a sequined dress followed, her blonde hair immaculate, despite the mascara streaks on her cheeks. Clare Montgomery, Atlanta's darling socialite, clutched a designer clutch, her voice sharp as she addressed the attending physician, Dr. Marcus Thompson. "Do you know who my husband is? He needs the best care. Specialists, flown in from New York if necessary," Aisha observed from the nurse's station, noting Clare's commanding presence. The woman's elegance clashed with the sterile chaos of the ER, but her tears seemed rehearsed, her grip on Dr. Thompson's arm more possessive than desperate. Linda leaned close. "That's Clare Montgomery Harrington. Old money, new power. She's not used to being told no." The next hour was a blur. Ed was stabilized, but remained unconscious, his handsome face bruised beneath bandages. A CT scan confirmed severe traumatic brain injury, with a Glasgow coma scale score of 3, deep coma. Dr. Lisa Patel, the neurologist, warned of long-term complications. He may never wake, or if he does, he might not be the same. Aisha was assigned to Ed's care team, a decision that drew a sharp glance from Clare as Aisha entered the ICU to check his vitals. "Are you qualified?" Clare asked, her blue eyes narrowing as she looked Aisha up and down, lingering on her dark skin and simple ponytail. The question hung heavy, laced with assumptions Aisha had faced her entire career. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington," Aisha replied, her voice steady. "I graduated top of my class from Emory, with 5 years of ICU experience. Your husband is in good hands. Claire pursed her lips, unconvinced. This equipment is expensive. Be careful. She turned away, already dialing her phone, her voice shifting to a polished tone as she spoke to someone about arrangements. Aisha focused on Ed, adjusting his IV and checking his pupil response. His chart noted his love of horses, a detail that caught her eye. Her father had worked in stables, teaching her to ride before he passed. Alone in the quiet ICU, she spoke softly, a habit she'd developed with comatose patients. Mr. Harrington, I've seen all kinds of folks in these beds. Rich, poor, black, white. Doesn't matter here. What matters is the fight in you. And something tells me you've got plenty of that. Outside, news vans gathered in the hospital parking lot, their lights creating an artificial dawn. Atlanta's elite were already buzzing about Ed Harrington's accident, their whispers tinged with curiosity and judgment. Why was a black nurse caring for one of their own? The unspoken but palpable question echoed in the society pages and private clubs. Aisha felt the weight of their gaze, even from miles away. She thought of Jamal, asleep at home, dreaming of basketball and superheroes. She was fighting for him as much as for her patients. As she made her final rounds, Aisha glanced at Ed's peaceful face. "Looks like it's just you and me for now, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I promise, I'm not going anywhere." She didn't know then that her words would become a vow that would test her courage against prejudice, betrayal, and a city divided by class and color. Nor did she know that Ed, silent and still, was already beginning to change her life, and that of Atlanta itself. In the quiet of the ICU, with the city's eyes watching, Aisha Thompson stood tall, unaware she was stepping into a story that would challenge everything Atlanta thought it knew about love, loyalty, and the power of a single heart to light the darkest night. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital buzzed softly as Aisha Thompson leaned against the nurse's station, sipping lukewarm coffee. It was her 6th night shift in a row, and the weight of exhaustion pressed against her temples. A week had passed since Edward Harrington's car crash, and his condition remained unchanged. A deep coma, his vitals stable but unresponsive. Aisha's meticulous care, adjusting IV drips, monitoring intracranial pressure, repositioning him to prevent bed sores, had earned her quiet respect from the ICU team, but not from Clare Montgomery Harrington. Clare's sharp glances and whispered complaints followed Aisha like a shadow, a reminder of the world that judged her before she spoke. At home, the challenges were just as relentless. Aisha's one-bedroom apartment in a modest Atlanta neighborhood was a sanctuary for her and Jamal, but the bills piled up faster than her paychecks could cover. Last night, Jamal had sat at their small kitchen table, his crayons scattered, and asked Mama, "Why don't we have a big house like the one on TV?" Aisha's heart ached as she explained, "We've got love, baby. That's bigger than any house." She hadn't told him about the past, how she'd lost her nursing job in Virginia for refusing to lie about a patient's addiction, how the wealthy family's influence had blocked her, forcing her to start over in Atlanta. The memory stung, but it fueled her resolve to give Jamal a better future. In the ICU, Aisha checked Ed's chart, noting his latest EEG results. Minimal brain activity, consistent with a Glasgow Coma Scale score of 3. Dr. Lisa Patel had warned that recovery, if possible, could take months or years, with risks of cognitive impairment. Aisha adjusted Ed's ventilator, her hands steady despite the fatigue. She glanced at his face, still handsome beneath the fading bruises, and thought of her father. He'd worked in stables, teaching her to ride horses and to face life's injustices with grit. "You'd like horses, Mr. Harrington," she murmured. a habit of talking to comatose patients. My daddy said they teach you trust. The nurse's station buzzed with activity as Linda Carter approached. Claire's been on the phone again, Linda said, her voice low. Talking to that lawyer, Robert Klein, about insurance policies and power of attorney. She's barely looked at Ed. Aisha nodded, her jaw tightening. She'd overheard Claire's calls, her tone more calculated than grieving, discussing assets and control. The words echoed the whispers of Atlanta's elite, who gathered in country clubs and charity galas, speculating about Ed's empire and Aisha's place there. The society pages had already printed snide remarks. Harrington's nurse, overstepping her station. The prejudice wasn't new, but it cut deeper in a city where wealth and status defined worth. Aisha's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in Ed's room. Clare stood by his bed, her designer coat draped over a chair, berating a young orderly. This room is a mess. Do you know how important my husband is? Aisha entered, her presence calming the orderly, who scurried out. Clare turned, her eyes narrowing. Nurse Thompson, I expect better oversight. This is unacceptable. Aisha met her gaze, her voice even. I'll ensure everything's in order, Mrs. Harrington. Your husband's care is my priority. Claire's lips pursed, but she said nothing, grabbing her phone and stepping into the hall. Along with Ed, Aisha checked his pupils, noting no change. She adjusted his pillows, her hands gentle. You don't know it, Mr. Harrington, but you're teaching me something, she said softly. Folks like Clare think they own the world, but you and I are fighting the same fight here. She thought of Jamal, who dreamed of playing basketball despite his worn sneakers, and of her dream of opening a community clinic where people like her wouldn't be judged. The thought steadied her, but the hospital's atmosphere grew heavier daily. Later, as Aisha updated Ed's chart, she overheard Clare speaking to Robert Klein in the hallway. We need to move quickly, Clare said, her voice hushed. The board won't wait forever. Aisha's stomach twisted. She'd seen the documents Clare carried. Legal forms, financial statements, and something about Ed's community housing project, a plan to build affordable homes in Atlanta's struggling neighborhoods. Clare had dismissed it as charity nonsense in a call Aisha had overheard, but Ed's staff, like his housekeeper Mabel, spoke of it with reverence. Mabel once told her that Mr. Ed wanted to give back, but her eyes were misty. The societal pressure was palpable. Atlanta's black communities, often overlooked by the elite, watched Aisha's story unfold, and their support was a quiet undercurrent in local radio shows and church gatherings. They saw her as one of their own, fighting a system stacked against her. Yet the elite's whispers grew louder, questioning her motives for caring so closely for Ed. Aisha ignored the noise, focusing on her work, but the strain was mounting. Her babysitter had called earlier, asking for a raise that Aisha couldn't afford. Jamal's school had sent a note about unpaid lunch fees. Each challenge felt like a test, but Aisha refused to break. As her shift ended, Aisha stood by Ed's bed, checking his monitors one last time. The ICU was quiet, the city's lights twinkling through the window. She thought of her father's mantra, whispered it like a prayer. Truth bends, but it never breaks. She looked at Ed, his chest rising and falling with the ventilator's rhythm. You keep fighting, Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice firm. I've got my battles, but I'm not letting you down. She didn't know then that Claire's plans were darkening, that the whispers were turning into a storm. All Aisha knew was her duty, to Ed, to Jamal, to the truth she carried like a torch in the night. The hum of Mercy General Hospital's ICU was a constant companion for Aisha Thompson as she navigated her 10th night shift in 2 weeks. It was mid-February 2025, and Edward Harrington's condition remained a delicate balance of hope and uncertainty. His vitals were stable, but his EEG showed only fleeting bursts of brain activity, a faint flicker in the deep coma that held him. Aisha adjusted his nasal cannula, ensuring steady oxygen flow, and checked his intracranial pressure monitor. Dr. Lisa Patel had explained that auditory stimulation, voices, music, could sometimes spark neural responses in comatose patients, though results were unpredictable. Aisha had taken to talking to Ed during her rounds, sharing snippets of her life, but tonight, her thoughts were elsewhere. At home, Jamal had woken with a fever, his small body curled under a thin blanket. The babysitter, already stretched thin, couldn't stay late, and Aisha's neighbor was unavailable. With no other options, she'd bundled Jamal into his coat and brought him to the hospital, his backpack stuffed with coloring books and a basketball trading card. "Stay in the break room, baby," she'd instructed, setting him up with a blanket on the couch. "Mama's got to check on her patient. Be quiet as a mouse, okay?" Jamal nodded, his eyes bright despite the flush of illness, and clutched his favorite card, a worn LeBron James rookie. "I'll be good, Mama," he promised. Now, as Aisha updated Ed's chart, guilt gnawed at her. Bringing Jamal to work was a risk. Hospital policy frowned on it, and Clare Montgomery Harrington's watchful eyes missed nothing. Clare's hostility had grown since Aisha overheard her plotting with Robert Klein, the lawyer, about seizing Ed's assets. The society pages fueled the tension, printing snide columns about the nurse who lingers too long by Harrington's bedside. Atlanta's black communities, meanwhile, rallied quietly, their support voiced in church bulletins and local podcasts. "Aisha's one of us," a radio host had said, fighting for a man the elite would rather forget. The city's divide was palpable, and Aisha felt caught in its crosshairs. She pushed the thoughts aside and headed to Ed's room, her sneakers silent on the linoleum. The ICU was dim, the monitors casting a soft glow. She checked Ed's pupils, still unresponsive, and adjusted his IV drip, her hands steady from years of practice. "You're holding on, Mr. Harrington," she murmured. "My daddy used to say a good fight takes time. You've got time." She paused, thinking of Jamal. "My boy's here tonight. He's got a fever, but he's tough. Loves basketball, just like his granddaddy loved horses." As she turned to leave, a small figure slipped into the room. Jamal stood by Ed's bed, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his LeBron card in hand. "Jamal," Aisha whispered, her heart lurching. "I told you to stay in the break room." "I got bored, Mama," he said, his voice soft but clear. He looked at Ed, his eyes curious. "Is this Mr. Ed? The one you talked to?" Before Aisha could usher him out, Jamal stepped closer, holding up his card. "Hey, Mr. Ed, I scored 3 points in basketball today. Coach said I'm fast, but Jimmy's got new shoes and is quicker. I told him I don't need shoes to win." Aisha froze, ready to scold, but something caught her eye. Ed's EEG monitor, usually a flat line with occasional spikes, showed a distinct wave, a burst of theta activity. She glanced at the vitals. His heart rate had ticked slightly, a subtle but measurable response. Her pulse quickened. She'd read about coma patients reacting to familiar voices, but Jamal was a stranger. Could his chatter be reaching Ed? "Baby, keep talking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She grabbed her phone, noting the time, 2:17 a.m., and the monitor readings. Jamal, oblivious to the significance, continued. "Anyway, I'm saving for new sneakers. Mama says I gotta earn 'em. Oh, and I made a layup. Wanna hear how?" The EEG spiked again, a second wave, more substantial than the first. Aisha's hands trembled as she jotted down the data, her mind racing. She'd need to report this to Dr. Patel, but she couldn't risk Clare finding out. The moment was shattered by a sharp voice at the door. "What is this?" Clare stood in the doorway, her coat draped over her arm, her face a mask of fury. A hospital room isn't a playground. Her eyes darted from Jamal to Aisha, narrowing with contempt. This is entirely unprofessional. I'll have your job for this. Aisha stepped in front of Jamal, her voice calm but firm. My son's not feeling well, Mrs. Harrington. He's not disturbing anyone. I'm doing my job. She gestured to the monitors, her tone steady. Your husband's showing signs of response. I'll be reporting it to Dr. Patel. Claire's lips curled. Response? Don't invent miracles to save yourself. Robert and the hospital board will hear about this. She turned on her heel, her heels clicking as she stormed out. Jamal clutched Aisha's hand, his eyes wide. Did I do something bad, Mama? No, baby, Aisha said, kneeling to hug him. You did something amazing. Mr. Ed heard you. She led him back to the break room, her mind spinning. Dr. Patel arrived an hour later, reviewing the EEG data quietly, excitedly. This is significant, she said. Auditory stimuli can trigger neural pathways, especially in early recovery. Your son's voice, his cadence and energy, might be breaking through. Aisha nodded, but her relief was tempered by fear. Claire's threat loomed large, and the hospital's hierarchy often bent to wealth. She thought of Atlanta's divided heart, the elite who saw her as an interloper, the communities who saw her as a symbol. Jamal's innocent chatter had sparked hope, but also drawn Claire's wrath. As she tucked Jamal into the break room couch, his fever-warmed cheek against her hand, Aisha whispered, You're my hero. You know that? He smiled sleepily, clutching his LeBron card. Back in the ICU, Aisha stood by Ed's bed, the monitors steady again. Your fight's getting stronger, Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice soft but resolute. And now you've got Jamal in your corner. She didn't know then that Claire's anger was only the beginning, that the spark Jamal had ignited would both light Ed's path and cast dangerous shadows. All she knew was that hope, fragile as it was, had taken root in the quiet of that night. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled Mercy General Hospital's ICU as Aisha Thompson moved through her rounds, her eyes scanning Edward Harrington's monitors. It was late February 2025, and Ed's coma persisted, though Jamal's visits had sparked faint EEG responses. Theta waves that hinted at neural activity. Aisha adjusted Ed's IV line, ensuring the saline drip was steady, and checked his ventilator settings. Dr. Lisa Patel had noted that these responses, while promising, didn't guarantee recovery. The brain's healing was a slow, unpredictable dance. Still, Aisha clung to the hope, her father's words echoing. Truth bends, but it never breaks. Clare Montgomery Harrington's presence had become a storm cloud over the ward. Since catching Jamal in Ed's room, Claire's hostility has sharpened, and her complaints to the hospital board have been relentless. Aisha overheard her in the hallway, her voice low but venomous, speaking to Robert Klein, the lawyer. She's a liability, Claire said. We need someone more suitable. The word stung, but Aisha focused on her work, aware that Atlanta's elite watched her every move. The society pages printed veiled jabs. Harrington's nurse, too close for comfort. Meanwhile, local black churches and community centers buzzed with support, their newsletters calling Aisha a beacon in a divided city. The contrast was stark, a reminder of the systemic barriers she navigated daily. Aisha's suspicions about Claire deepened. She'd noticed Claire signing documents during visits, legal forms, financial statements, and papers tied to Ed's community housing project, a plan to build affordable homes in Atlanta's underserved neighborhoods. Aisha had glimpsed a memo dismissing it as unprofitable, with Claire's initials scrawled in red. When the ICU was quiet at night, Aisha caught Claire meeting Thomas Reed, Ed's business rival, in the hospital cafeteria. Their hushed tones and glances suggested more than casual concern. Aisha's gut churned. She'd seen this before in Virginia, where wealth bent truth to serve power. One evening, as Aisha checked Ed's pupil response, still fixed and dilated, she was startled by a visitor. Ed's longtime housekeeper, Mabel, slipped into the room, her worn hands clutching a scarf. "I had to come when Miss Clare wasn't here," Mabel whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "She's changing everything at the house, firing staff, selling Mr. Ed's horses, even tried to auction his art collection." Aisha's breath caught. Mabel's voice trembled as she described Ed's kindness, how he'd paid for her grandson's college and planned the housing project to honor his father's belief in community. "Miss Clare calls it charity nonsense," Mabel said, "but it's Mr. Ed's heart." Aisha listened, her hands tightening on Ed's chart. "Why now?" she asked. Mabel's eyes glistened. "She's after his empire. With him like this, she's got power of attorney. I heard her talking to Mr. Reed about selling the company." Aisha nodded, her mind racing. She thought of Jamal, asleep in their apartment, and the clinic she dreamed of opening, a place where care trumped status. Ed's project aligned with that dream, and Clare's actions threatened to erase it. The next night, Aisha noticed something alarming. Ed's blood pressure monitor was unplugged, its screen dark. She reconnected it, her pulse spiking as she checked the logs. The disconnection had lasted 20 minutes, unnoticed by the previous shift. It wasn't the first anomaly. Charts had gone missing, and a medication dose had been mislabeled last week. Aisha suspected sabotage, but had no proof. Acting on instinct, she slipped a small digital recorder into her pocket, hiding it under Ed's pillow during her rounds. If Clare was plotting, Aisha needed evidence. Her gamble paid off 2 nights later. As Aisha monitored Ed from the nurse's station, Clare and Thomas arrived, assuming the room was empty. The recorder captured their voices, precise and chilling. "Once he's declared vegetative, we're free," Clare said, her tone cold. "The board will approve the sale, and your merger gets the green light." Thomas chuckled. "And the housing project? Gone. No more bleeding profits for people with low incomes." Aisha's blood ran cold as she retrieved the recorder, her hands shaking. She copied the file to a USB drive and shared it with Dr. Patel and the hospital's legal team the next morning. "This is explosive," Dr. Patel said, her face grave. "But Clare's family has deep ties. Politicians, judges. Be careful, Aisha." The hospital lawyer echoed the warning. "People like her own this town. You're challenging a machine." Aisha nodded, undeterred. She thought of her father, who'd faced down stable owners who cheated workers, and of Jamal, whose bright eyes deserved a world where truth mattered. The black community's support, voiced in rallies outside City Hall, bolstered her courage. "She's fighting for us all," a protester's sign read, symbolizing the broader struggle against Atlanta's entrenched elite. Back in the ICU, Aisha stood by Ed's bed, the monitors a steady hum. She checked his EEG, no new spikes, but the earlier responses lingered in her mind. "You've got people who need you, Mr. Harrington," she said softly. "Your project, your heart, it's worth fighting for." She thought of the recorder, now with the legal team, and Clare's icy stare. The storm was coming, and Aisha knew she'd be at its center. But as she adjusted Ed's blanket, her resolve hardened. She'd faced worse. Block lists, prejudice, a system that favored wealth over right. This time, she wasn't just fighting for Ed or Jamal. She was fighting for a truth that could change Atlanta's soul. The ICU at Mercy General Hospital was a cocoon of soft beeps and sterile calm, but the air crackled with tension for Aisha Thompson. It was early March 2025, and Edward Harrington's coma held firm, though Jamal's visits had sparked fleeting EEG responses, theta waves that Dr. Lisa Patel called a whisper of hope. Aisha adjusted Ed's feeding tube, ensuring the flow was steady, and checked his latest labs. Stable electrolytes, no signs of infection. The medical team was cautiously optimistic, but recovery remained a distant prospect, with risks of motor and cognitive deficits. Aisha's recorder, now with the hospital's legal team, had captured Clare Montgomery Harrington's plot with Thomas Reed to seize Ed's empire, but no action had been taken yet. The delay gnawed at Aisha, who sensed Clare's influence tightening like a noose. Clare's campaign against Aisha intensified after the incident with Jamal. Her complaints to the hospital board painted Aisha as negligent, and the society pages amplified the narrative. Harrington's nurse, a risk to recovery? Atlanta's black communities countered with quiet strength, their support evident in community center flyers and social media posts on X, calling Aisha a fighter for justice. The city's divide was stark, with wealth and power shielding Clare's maneuvers. Aisha felt the weight of it all, her precarious job, Jamal's needs, and the dream of a community clinic that seemed further away each day. That night, as Aisha reviewed Ed's chart, a chill ran through her. The medication log showed an anomaly, a dose of morphine listed as administered during her shift, but she hadn't given it. She double-checked the vial count. 2 were missing. Her heart sank. She'd seen this tactic before in Virginia, where a false accusation had cost her everything. Before she could report it, the ICU door swung open, and Clare entered, flanked by 2 police officers and a hospital administrator, Dr. Karen Roberts. "That's her," Clare said, her voice trembling with theatrical grief, tears glistening in the fluorescent light. "She's been stealing my husband's medication, endangering his life." She clutched a monogrammed handkerchief, her eyes avoiding Aisha's. Aisha's breath caught. "That's not true," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I've never touched his meds without protocol. Check the logs. I reported a discrepancy just now." Dr. Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "We found vials in your locker, Aisha. Mrs. Harrington reported suspicious behavior." The officer stepped forward, one holding handcuffs. Aisha's mind raced to Jamal, asleep at a neighbor's, unaware his mother was about to be taken away. She thought of Ed, defenseless in his bed, and the recorder that could expose Clare, if it wasn't too late. "Mrs. Harrington," Aisha said, locking eyes with Clare, "you know I'm fighting for your husband's life." She thought she saw Ed's eyelids flutter for a moment, a faint twitch that sent a jolt through her. But the officers moved closer, and the cold click of handcuffs snapped around her wrists. As they led her out, Aisha glanced back at Ed, his monitors steady. "Stay strong, Mr. Harrington," she whispered. "The truth always comes out." In the police station's holding cell, Aisha sat on a hard bench, the fluorescent buzz a cruel echo of the ICU. Her thoughts swirled. Jamal, alone and scared. Ed, vulnerable without her care. And Clare, weaving a web of lies. The media had already pounced, and X posted, branding her a gold-digger nurse exploiting a billionaire. Atlanta's elite reveled in the scandal, while community leaders called for calm, their voices drowned out by sensational headlines. Aisha clutched her father's mantra like a lifeline. Truth bends, but it never breaks. She thought of Jamal's basketball card, his dreams of new sneakers, and her fight to show him what integrity meant. The cell door clanged, and an officer appeared. "You've got a visitor," he said. Mabel, Ed's housekeeper, stood there, her scarf clutched tightly. "I know you didn't do it," she said, her voice fierce. Mr. Ed's cameras at the house caught Miss Clare and Mr. Reed planting something. "I'm getting a lawyer." Aisha's heart lifted. But fear lingered. Clare's influence ran deep, and the hospital's hesitation to act on the recorder suggested powerful allies. Jamal's face flashed in her mind. His question about why they moved so much. His trust in her strength. Aisha leaned against the cell wall, her resolve hardening. She'd faced injustice before, blocked in Virginia for refusing to lie, forced to rebuild for Jamal's sake. This was bigger, a fight not just for her, but for Ed's legacy and Atlanta's underserved communities, who saw her as a symbol. The recorder, now in Dr. Patel's hands, held the truth. But Clare's next move loomed. As dawn broke through a barred window, Aisha whispered, "Keep fighting, Mr. Harrington. I'm not giving up either." She didn't know then that Mabel's evidence would spark a chain reaction, or that Ed's faint stirrings were a sign of a battle just beginning. The cold steel of the holding cell bench pressed against Aisha Thompson's back as dawn broke over Atlanta on March 3, 2025. The previous night's events, Clare Montgomery Harrington's accusation, the handcuffs, the media frenzy, played in her mind like a relentless loop. Mercy General Hospital's ICU felt a world away, where Edward Harrington lay in his coma, his monitors a lifeline Aisha could no longer tend. She thought of Jamal, staying with their neighbor, his small hands clutching his basketball card, unaware of the storm engulfing his mother. The X posts branding her a thief and opportunist echoed Clare's lies, amplified by Atlanta's elite. Yet Aisha held fast to her father's mantra: truth bends, but it never breaks. A clang at the cell door snapped her from her thoughts. An officer stepped aside, revealing Mabel, Ed's housekeeper. Her scarf knotted tightly. Beside her stood Sandra Brooks, a sharp-eyed attorney known for taking on powerful adversaries. "We're getting you out," Mabel said, her voice fierce. "Mr. Ed's home cameras caught Miss Clare and Mr. Reed planting those vials in your locker." Sandra nodded, holding a file. "The footage is clear. Clare and Thomas Reed conspired to frame you. I've filed for your release." Aisha's heart leaped, but caution tempered her relief. "Clare's got connections," she said. "Will it be enough?" Sandra's smile was steely. "It's a start. The hospital's legal team has your recorder too. We're building a case." Within hours, Aisha was released, and the charges were dropped pending investigation. She stepped into the morning light, the city's skyline looming, and hugged Mabel tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Mabel squeezed her hand. Mr. Ed always said loyalty shows when the chips are down. Back at Mercy General, Aisha faced a new blow. Dr. Karen Roberts, the hospital administrator, met her at the entrance. "I'm sorry, Aisha," she said, her voice heavy. "You're suspended until this is resolved." Clare's family pushed hard. Aisha's stomach sank. Suspension meant she couldn't protect Ed, couldn't check his ventilator, or watch for EEG spikes. She thought of Jamal, who'd asked last night, "Why can't you help Mr. Ed, Mama?" His confusion had cut deeper than the handcuffs. Sometimes she'd told him that doing right means waiting, but the words felt hollow now. Yet Aisha wasn't alone. The hospital staff, nurses, orderlies, even cafeteria workers, rallied around her. Linda Carter, the head nurse, started a logbook, documenting every suspicious move by Clare or Thomas. One orderly reported Clare tampering with Ed's chart, and another caught Thomas lingering near the medication room. "We see you, Aisha," Linda said, handing her a coffee. "You've been fighting for Ed when no one else would." The support extended beyond the hospital. Atlanta's black communities, galvanized by Aisha's ordeal, held vigils outside City Hall, their signs reading, "Justice for Aisha, justice for us." X posts from local activists spread her story, countering the elite's narrative with calls for accountability. Aisha spent her days with Sandra, poring over evidence. Mabel had accessed Ed's home security footage, revealing Clare selling his prized horses and redirecting funds from his community housing project. "She's dismantling his legacy," Mabel said, her voice trembling. Aisha nodded, thinking of her dream, a clinic for Atlanta's underserved, where care wasn't a privilege. Ed's project mirrored that vision, and Clare's greed threatened to erase it. At home, Jamal struggled with the chaos. "Mama, are you in trouble because of Mr. Ed?" he asked, his eyes wide as he colored a basketball. Aisha knelt beside him, her heart aching. "No, baby. I'm in trouble because I'm fighting for what's right like Granddaddy taught us." The hospital staff's vigilance yielded results. Late one night, Linda caught Thomas attempting to alter Ed's medication orders, increasing his sedative dose. She reported it to Dr. Patel, who flagged it as a potential danger to Ed's recovery. "His brain's showing theta waves," Dr. Patel said. "Any disruption could set him back." The incident strengthened Aisha's case, but Clare's influence loomed large. Wary of the Montgomery family's connections, the hospital board hesitated to act on the recorder or footage. Aisha felt helpless, and her suspension was a barrier between her and Ed's bedside. One evening, over coffee with Mabel, Aisha confided her fears. "I can't protect him from here," she said, her voice low. "What if they hurt him?" Mabel squeezed her hand. "Mr. Ed always said you can tell a person's heart by how they act when the world's against them." "You're showing yours, Aisha." The words echoed her father's lessons, grounding her. She thought of Jamal, practicing layups despite his worn sneakers, and the community rallies, their voices a chorus against injustice. Atlanta's divide was clear, the elite's power versus the people's resilience. As Aisha tucked Jamal into bed, he clutched his LeBron card. "Mama, tell Mr. Ed I miss him," he said sleepily. Aisha kissed his forehead, her resolve hardening. "I will, baby. Soon." She didn't know then that Ed's monitors were flickering with new activity, or that the evidence she'd gathered was about to shift the tide. All she knew was that her fight, for Ed, for Jamal, for truth, was far from over. The city watched, its heart split between privilege and justice, as Aisha stood ready to face the storm. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital's ICU cast a sterile glow over Edward Harrington's room, where monitors hummed with a steady rhythm. It was mid-March 2025, and Aisha Thompson's suspension had left her sidelined, unable to tend to Ed's care. Yet the hospital staff's vigilance, sparked by her fight against Clare Montgomery Harrington's lies, had kept Ed's condition stable. Dr. Lisa Patel, reviewing Ed's latest EEG, had noted sustained theta waves, a sign of emerging neural activity, likely spurred by Jamal's visits. The medical team adjusted his sedatives cautiously, wary of setbacks to his fragile recovery. Aisha, barred from the ward, clung to hope, her father's mantra, a quiet anchor. Truth bends, but it never breaks. Clare's accusation of theft had ignited a firestorm. Atlanta's elite devoured the scandal, with ex-posts branding Aisha a scheming nurse exploiting a billionaire. But the city's black communities rallied, their vigils outside Mercy General growing louder, signs proclaiming, "Aisha fights for truth." The divide was stark, a microcosm of Atlanta's fractured soul, wealth shielding Clare's lies, while grassroots voices demanded justice. Aisha, working with attorney Sandra Brooks, had entrusted her recorder and Mabel's footage to the hospital's legal team, but Clare's influence delayed action. At home, Jamal's questions cut deep. "Mama, when can you return to Mr. Ed?" he asked, clutching his basketball card. Aisha hugged him, her voice soft. "Soon, baby. We're waiting for the truth to catch up. Everything changed when Dr. Patel called. Aisha, we need you back, she said urgently. Ed's showing signs of consciousness. The board lifted your suspension. Claire's pushback isn't holding. Aisha's heart raced as she returned to the ICU, her scrubs a familiar armor. The ward buzzed with tension, nurses whispering about Claire's latest visit, her demands for a private caregiver ignored. Aisha entered Ed's room, her eyes scanning his monitors. Heart rate steady, oxygen saturation normal. She checked his pupil response, noting a slight dilation. A new development. You're still in there, Mr. Harrington, she murmured, adjusting his nasal cannula. That night, as Aisha reviewed his chart, Ed's monitors flickered. His EEG showed a sharp spike. Alpha waves, a hallmark of conscious brain activity. She leaned closer, her breath catching as his eyelids fluttered, then opened briefly, revealing unfocused hazel eyes. His lips moved, forming a faint sound. Aisha. The word, hoarse but unmistakable, sent a jolt through her. She hit the call button, and Dr. Patel rushed in, followed by nurses. He's emerging, Dr. Patel confirmed, and he is checking the monitors. It's slow, weeks of therapy ahead. But this is real. Aisha's hands trembled as she noted the time. 1:42 a. Monsieur Jamal's voice had reached him. Now her name was his first word. The hospital erupted in whispers. By morning, the news spread like wildfire, reaching Clare as she arrived. Her designer coat pristine despite her feigned distress. It's nonsense, she snapped, her eyes cold. Random twitches, nothing more. But the medical data, EEG spikes, pupil changes, contradicted her. Aisha stood firm, her voice steady. Mrs. Harrington, your husband spoke my name. He's fighting to come back. Claire's face tightened, but she turned away, dialing Robert Klein. Aisha knew the battle was far from over. Atlanta's black communities seized the moment, their rallies swelling outside the hospital. Aisha saved him, read one banner, shared widely on X, countering the elite's narrative. Local pastors and activists praised her as a symbol of resilience, their voices amplifying the call for justice. Aisha felt their support, a lifeline against Claire's influence. At home, she told Jamal, Mr. Ed had woken up, baby. He said my name. Jamal's eyes lit up. Does that mean he likes my stories? Aisha smiled, ruffling his hair. It does. You helped him too. In the ICU, Aisha worked tirelessly with Ed's therapy team, guiding him through gentle stimuli, squeezing a hand, tracking a light. His responses were inconsistent, a hallmark of early emergence, but each moment was a victory. She thought of her clinic dream, inspired by Ed's housing project, and her father's lessons about standing tall. Claire's shadow loomed, her calls with Thomas Reed hinting at darker plans. Aisha confided in Linda Carter, who nodded grimly. We're watching them. You focus on Ed. The staff's loyalty, forged in Aisha's fight, was a quiet army. As Aisha stood by Ed's bed, his monitors steady, she whispered, You're waking up, Mr. Harrington. We've got a fight ahead, but you're not alone. She didn't know then that Sandra's evidence was about to break Claire's schemes wide open, or that Ed's awakening would shift Atlanta's heart. All she knew was that a spark had ignited, a spark of life, truth, and hope, and she'd guard it with everything she had. The ICU at Mercy General Hospital thrummed with quiet urgency as Aisha Thompson stood by Edward Harrington's bedside, the monitors casting a soft glow. It was late March 2025, and Ed's awakening, his hoarse utterance of Aisha days earlier, had shifted the hospital's atmosphere. His EEG now showed consistent alpha waves, signaling early consciousness, though Dr. Lisa Patel cautioned that full recovery would be a marathon, with risks of memory gaps and motor challenges. Aisha adjusted Ed's oxygen mask, her hands steady as she guided him through simple commands. "Squeeze my hand, Mr. Harrington." His fingers twitched, a fragile victory. Outside, Atlanta buzzed with the news. The city's divide stark. Black communities rallied for Aisha, their ex-posts and church vigils hailing her as a hero, while the elite clung to Clare Montgomery Harrington's narrative of random twitches. Clare's grip was slipping. Her attempts to discredit Ed's awakening had faltered against medical evidence, and Aisha's recorder, capturing Clare's plot with Thomas Reed to seize Ed's empire, sat with the hospital's legal team. Reinstated after her suspension, Aisha felt the weight of Atlanta's eyes. The society pages still sneered, labeling her a meddling nurse, but grassroots support grew, with local radio calling her Atlanta's conscience. At home, Jamal beamed with pride. "Mr. Ed said your name, Mama." He bounced his basketball. "Does he know my stories helped?" Aisha hugged him, her heart full. "He will, baby. You gave him something to fight for." Sandra Brooks, the attorney, moved swiftly. She presented Mabel's security footage and Aisha's recording to the police, revealing Clare and Thomas tampering with Ed's car to cause the crash. The evidence was damning. Clare's voice, cold and calculating, planning to declare Ed vegetative and sell his companies, including his community housing project. "Arrest warrants are issued," Sandra told Aisha over coffee, her eyes gleaming. "They're done." By noon, police escorted Clare and Thomas from the hospital, cameras flashing as Atlanta's elite gasped. Ex-posts exploded. Billionaire's wife arrested for attempted murder. The black community's rallies swelled, their signs now reading, "Truth wins." In the ICU, Ed's moments of consciousness lengthened. He focused his eyes briefly, his voice rumbling as he spoke single words. "Horses." Aisha, guided by Mabel's stories, shared tales of Ed's kindness, how he'd funded scholarships, how his housing project aimed to uplift Atlanta's poorest. "You're more than your money," she said, adjusting his pillows. Ed's hand twitched, his eyes locking on hers. "Knew something," he whispered, his voice halting. "Clare. Angry. Project." Aisha's breath caught. Ed's memories were surfacing, fragmented but real. She saw guilt in his eyes, a flicker of regret for trusting Clare. "I ignored signs," Ed said, his words slow as he gripped her hand. "Chased status, not love." Aisha squeezed back, her voice gentle. "You're finding your way now, Mr. Harrington. Your heart's still there." She thought of her fight, blocked in Virginia for truth, now fighting for Ed's legacy and her clinic dream. Jamal's visits had left a mark, limited by the aftermath of her suspension. "Tell Mr. Ed I got a new high score," Jamal had said, his basketball card tucked in his pocket. Aisha shared this with Ed, who managed a faint smile. "Good, kid," he rasped. The hospital staff, emboldened by Clare's arrest, doubled their vigilance. Linda Carter caught a nurse hired by Clare attempting to alter Ed's sedative dose, reporting it to Dr. Patel. "We're protecting him," Linda said, her eyes fierce. "For you, Aisha." The community support echoed inside the ward, with nurses slipping Aisha notes from rally organizers. "You're changing Atlanta." The city's divide was shifting, the elite's whispers drowned by voices from below. Aisha felt the tide turning, but Clare's family, the Montgomerys, loomed as a lingering threat, their influence deep in Atlanta's courts and clubs. Ed's therapy progressed, each step a battle. Aisha guided him through eye-tracking exercises. His responses were stronger, but inconsistent. Dr. Patel explained that his frontal lobe is rebuilding connections, but it's slow. Emotional bonds, like yours, help. Aisha blushed, her professionalism a shield against the growing warmth in Ed's gaze. She thought of Jamal, practicing layups, and her father's lessons about dignity. "You're not just waking up," she told Ed, her voice soft. "You're reminding this city what matters." Ed's eyes held hers, a silent vow forming. As night fell, Aisha stood by Ed's bed, the skyline glittering through the window. "You're back, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice steady. "And we're not done fighting." She didn't know then that the Montgomerys would strike back, or Ed's emerging voice would reshape their world. All she knew was that truth, fragile as Ed's awakening, was breaking through, and Atlanta was watching, its heart poised to change. The soft hum of Mercy General Hospital's ICU had become a familiar rhythm for Aisha Thompson as she guided Edward Harrington through his recovery exercises. It was late March 2025, and Ed's emergence from his coma, marked by his whispered Aisha weeks earlier, had transformed the ward's atmosphere. His EEG showed steady alpha and beta waves, signs of conscious processing, though Dr. Lisa Patel warned of lingering risks, memory lapses, motor weakness, and emotional volatility. Aisha helped Ed track a pen with his eyes, her voice calm. "Follow the light, Mr. Harrington. Nice and slow." His gaze, clearer each day, held hers a moment too long, sparking a warmth she quickly pushed aside. Clare Montgomery Harrington and Thomas Reed's arrests for attempted murder had rocked Atlanta. The evidence, Mabel's security footage and Aisha's recorder, had exposed their plot to seize Ed's empire, dismantling his community housing project. The city's elite reeled, their society pages shifting from scorn to grudging curiosity about Aisha. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's nurse, savior or scandal?" Ex-posts from Atlanta's black communities countered with pride. Aisha Thompson showed us that truth wins. Rallies outside the hospital grew, with signs reading, "Justice for Ed, thanks to Aisha." The divide between wealth and community sharpened, framing Aisha as both hero and target. At home, Jamal's questions about Ed grew more pointed. "Mama, is Mr. Ed gonna be my dad?" he asked, bouncing his basketball on their apartment floor. Aisha paused, her heart catching. "He's our friend, baby," she said, ruffling his hair. "He's got a big fight, and we're helping him." Jamal's eyes, bright with hope, lingered on his LeBron card. "I told him about my layup. Think he remembers?" Aisha smiled, hiding her uncertainty. Her bond with Ed was deepening, but professionalism held her back, the city's scrutiny a constant weight. Ed's therapy sessions in the ICU revealed a man wrestling with his past. "I trusted Clare," he rasped during a session, his voice stronger but strained. "Saw her greed, ignored it, chased status." Aisha adjusted his arm brace, and her touch was gentle. "You're more than that," she said. "Mabel told me about your housing project and how you wanted to lift people. That's who you are." Ed's eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude. "You saw me when I was nothing." Their hands brushed, and Aisha's pulse quickened. She pulled back, focusing on his chart, but the moment lingered, electric and unspoken. Aisha shared her dreams with Ed during quiet shifts, her voice low. "I want a clinic, free care for folks who can't pay. My daddy taught me that dignity matters more than money." Ed listened, his gaze intense. "That's like my project," he said, his words halting. "We're not so different." Aisha blushed, redirecting to therapy exercises, but Ed's words echoed her hopes. She thought of her Virginia firing, when she'd stood up to lies for a patient's sake, and saw Ed's fight mirroring hers. Yet the media's gaze, calling their bond inappropriate, kept her guarded. The hospital staff, fiercely loyal, shielded Aisha from gossip. Linda Carter intercepted reporters sneaking into the ward, her glare unwavering. "She's saving him," Linda told a nurse. "That's all you need to know." But Atlanta's elite whispered in their clubs, questioning Aisha's motives. A local TV segment debated, "Is the nurse exploiting a vulnerable billionaire?" Aisha ignored it, but Jamal felt the sting. "Kids at school saw you on TV," he said, his voice small. "They said you're only nice to Mr. Ed 'cause he's rich." Aisha knelt, her voice firm. "Baby, we help people 'cause it's right, not for money like Granddaddy taught us." Ed's recovery progressed, each milestone a triumph. He held a cup, his grip shaky but determined, and stayed awake for hours, responding to simple questions. Dr. Patel noted that his prefrontal cortex is regaining function thanks to consistent stimulation. Aisha's presence and Jamal's stories were key. During one visit, Aisha relayed Jamal's latest tale. He got a new high score in basketball. Ed smiled, his voice rough. "Tell him, good job." Aisha's heart swelled, but she kept her distance, aware of the cameras outside. The Montgomery family's shadow lingered. Claire's mother, Evelyn, was rumored to be rallying allies, and her influence was a threat despite the arrests. Aisha confided in Mabel over tea. "They won't stop," she said, her voice low. "Not while Ed's still weak." Mabel nodded. "Mr. Ed trusted the wrong people once. Now he's got you." Aisha thought of her father's lessons, of Jamal's trust, and the community's rallies, their voices a shield against the elite's scorn. As night fell, Aisha stood by Ed's bed, the skyline a mosaic of light. She checked his vitals, her fingers lingering on his wrist. "You're coming back, Mr. Harrington," she said softly, "and we're building something bigger than us." She didn't know then that Evelyn's next move would test their bond, or that Ed's growing strength would reshape their path. All she knew was that fragile, unspoken love was taking root, and Atlanta's heart was watching, ready to shift. The spring light filtered through Mercy General Hospital's windows, casting a warm glow over Edward Harrington's private room. It was early April 2025, and Ed's recovery had gained momentum since his awakening a month prior. His EEG showed robust beta waves, signaling cognitive engagement, though Dr. Lisa Patel cautioned that motor skills and memory recall would improve slowly, with risks of fatigue and emotional strain. Aisha Thompson guided Ed through physical therapy, steadying his trembling hand as he gripped a walker. She said one step at a time, "Mr. Harrington," her voice encouraging. Ed's eyes, now sharp with determination, met hers, a silent gratitude passing between them. The arrests of Clare Montgomery Harrington and Thomas Reed for attempted murder had shaken Atlanta's elite, their influence crumbling under the weight of Mabel's footage and Aisha's recorder. The society pages, once venomous, now hedged their bets, with headlines like, "Harrington's Revival, A Nurse's Triumph?" Atlanta's black communities celebrated Aisha, and their rallies outside the hospital were a chorus of support, with ex-posts proclaiming that Aisha's truth had rebuilt a city. The divide remained, but the tide was turning, with grassroots voices challenging the old guard's power. Aisha felt the shift, her dream of a community clinic aligning with Ed's housing project, a vision Claire had tried to erase. Ed's therapy sessions revealed a man transformed. "I was blind," he said, his voice steadier but heavy with regret. "Claire wanted wealth and status. I let it cloud me. Aisha adjusted his walker, and her touch was gentle. "You're seeing now," she said. "Your project. It's about people, not profit." Ed nodded, his jaw tight. "I ignored my father's lessons. Build for others, not yourself." "You reminded me." Aisha's heart stirred, but she kept her focus professional, aware of the media's watchful eyes. Their bond, though unspoken, grew in quiet moments, a shared purpose taking root. At home, Jamal sensed the change. "Mama, is Mr. Ed gonna help people like us?" he asked, dribbling his basketball in their apartment. Aisha smiled, her voice soft. "He wants to, baby, like we do." Jamal's eyes lit up. "Can I tell him about my new layup? I got 4 points." Aisha promised he would, seeing his pride in helping Ed. But the scrutiny weighed heavily. A local news segment questioned whether the nurse's influence over Harrington was too much. Aisha brushed it off, but Jamal overheard kids at school whispering, "Your mom's only with him for money." He came home quiet, his basketball untouched. "They're wrong, baby," Aisha said, hugging him. "We fight for what's right, like Granddaddy taught." Now using a cane, Ed called a press conference from his hospital room. Aisha stood by, her presence steady as reporters gathered. Despite a slight tremor, Ed declared that I was restructuring my company, his voice firm. "The focus will be on community development, affordable housing, jobs, and hope." Shareholders, led by Clare's allies, revolted, threatening to sell. Their protests splashed across financial blogs. "Harrington's lost his mind," one claimed. Ed remained unshaken. "Let them sell," he told Aisha later. "Success means nothing if it's not shared." Inspired by her clinic dream, he announced the Thompson Harrington Foundation to fund healthcare and education in underserved areas. Aisha hesitated, the spotlight daunting. "I'm just a nurse," she said, her voice low. Ed's gaze held hers. "You're more than that. You and Jamal. You showed me what matters." Aisha agreed to co-lead the foundation, and her dream took shape. The announcement sparked a wave of support. Letters flooded in from mixed-race couples, single parents, and community leaders, their words on X echoing, "Aisha and Ed are building a new Atlanta." But Clare's mother, Evelyn Montgomery, lurked in the shadows, her family's influence a quiet threat. Aisha overheard nurses whispering about Evelyn's calls to the hospital board, demanding oversight of Ed's decisions. The staff's loyalty held firm. Linda Carter rebuffed Evelyn's attempts to install a private nurse, her voice sharp. "Aisha's the best we've got," she told a board member. Dr. Patel, monitoring Ed's recovery, noted his progress. "He walks short distances and speaks in complete sentences. Emotional connections, like yours, are key." Aisha blushed, her professionalism a shield against the warmth in Ed's smiles. Jamal's stories, shared through Aisha, brightened Ed's days. "Tell him, I'm proud," Ed said, his voice rough but warm. As Aisha checked Ed's vitals, the skyline glowing outside, she felt the city's pulse shifting. "You're changing things, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice steady. "We both are." She didn't know then that Evelyn's next move would test their vision, or their bond would face its greatest trial. All she knew was that purpose, forged in truth and shared dreams, was lighting a path forward, and Atlanta was watching, its heart ready to embrace a new way. The April sun warmed the rolling hills of Ed's private stable, where the scent of hay and leather mingled with the soft nickering of horses. It was mid-April 2025, and Edward Harrington's recovery had advanced remarkably since his emergence from a coma. Now walking with a cane, Ed navigated short distances, his motor skills sharpening though fatigue lingered as Dr. Lisa Patel had warned. His latest EEG showed sustained beta waves, signaling cognitive clarity, but emotional stress could still trigger setbacks. Aisha Thompson stood beside him, steadying his arm as he approached a gentle mare. "Easy, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice warm. "Your horse has missed you." Ed's smile, once rare, now came easily, especially around Aisha and Jamal. The arrests of Clare Montgomery Harrington and Thomas Reed for tampering with Ed's car had reshaped Atlanta's social landscape. The Thompson-Harrington Foundation, launched to fund healthcare and education in underserved neighborhoods, had sparked hope, with community leaders praising it on X. Aisha and Ed are rewriting Atlanta's story. The elite, shaken by the scandal, wavered between skepticism and reluctant admiration, their society pages now cautious. Harrington's new path: vision or folly? Atlanta's black communities stood firm, their rallies celebrating Aisha as a symbol of resilience. The city's divide was healing, but tensions simmered, with Clare's mother, Evelyn Montgomery, rallying allies to challenge Ed's decisions. Ed taught Jamal to brush the mare at the stable, his cane resting against a stall. "Gentle strokes, buddy," he said, his voice steady despite a slight tremor. Jamal grinned, his basketball card tucked in his pocket. "Mama said she rode horses with her daddy. Did you?" Aisha nodded, her eyes soft. "He taught me everything. Trust, patience." Ed's gaze lingered on her, recalling her coma-side stories. "You told me that," he said, his voice low. "Those long nights. Your voice kept me here." Aisha blushed, her professionalism a thin veil over the warmth between them. Their bond had deepened through shared dreams. Ed's housing project and Aisha's clinic vision are intertwined and rooted in lessons from her father about dignity over wealth. But public scrutiny weighed heavily. A TV segment questioned, "Is Harrington's nurse too close?" Jamal felt the sting at school. "Kids said you're using Mr. Ed," he told Aisha, his voice small. She hugged him, her voice firm. "We help people because it's right, baby. That's our truth." Jamal nodded, his pride in Aisha fierce. "I want Mr. Ed to come to my game," he said, hope in his eyes. Back at the hospital, Evelyn struck. She filed for conservatorship, claiming Ed's brain injury impaired his judgment. As Ed prepared to announce a new clinic at a foundation event, Evelyn's lawyers stormed in, led by her brother, Charles Montgomery. Charles declared that Mr. Harrington wasn't competent and was holding medical reports from the accident. His decisions, his foundation, his nurse, are misguided. Cameras flashed, ex-posts buzzing with speculation. Aisha's heart raced, but Ed squeezed her hand, standing tall with his cane. "I'm fully competent," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Every doctor here can confirm it." Dr. Patel stepped forward, her voice authoritative. "I've monitored Mr. Harrington for months. His brain scans show remarkable neuroplasticity, documented in the Journal of Neurology. He's of sound mind." Aisha, facing Charles's glare, spoke up. "I was fired in Virginia for refusing to lie about a patient. I'd do it again. Truth matters more than status." The crowd murmured, some clapping, led by Mabel, who'd slipped in. Sandra Brooks, the attorney, brandished a file. She said, "We've uncovered tax fraud in the Montgomery Foundation. Care to discuss that, Mr. Montgomery?" Charles paled, retreating with his team. The event resumed, and Ed turned to Aisha, his eyes intense. "He said you saved me, my life, my purpose," his voice soft. He reached for Jamal, who ran to him. "You both did." Ed knelt, cane wobbling, and took Aisha's hand. "Marry me, Aisha. Be my family, you and Jamal." Jamal tugged Ed's sleeve. "Can I call you Dad?" Ed's eyes glistened, I'd be honored, son. Aisha, tears falling, whispered, yes. The crowd erupted, cameras capturing the moment, ex-posts flooding with support. Love wins in Atlanta. As they embraced, Aisha felt Atlanta's pulse shift. The foundation's work, their bond, was forging a new path. She thought of her father, Jamal's future, and the city watching. The Montgomerys were defeated, but challenges loomed. We're just starting, she told Ed, her voice steady. She didn't know then that their union would redefine Atlanta's heart, or their love would face one final test. All she knew was that family, chosen, not born, was their strength, and they'd face the future together. The hospital garden at Mercy General glowed under the April sun, its blooming azaleas framing a simple wooden arch draped in white roses. It was late April 2025, and Aisha Thompson stood radiant in a flowing white dress, her hand in Edward Harrington's, his cane resting nearby. Ed's recovery had progressed steadily, his gait stronger, though Dr. Lisa Patel noted occasional fatigue, a reminder of his coma's lingering effects. His latest EEG showed robust cognitive function, a testament to months of therapy fueled by Aisha's care and Jamal's stories. Today, they were marrying in the place where their story began, surrounded by nurses, community leaders, and a few reformed elites, Atlanta's skyline shimmering in the distance. The arrests of Clare Montgomery Harrington and Thomas Reed for attempted murder had shattered the Montgomery family's influence. Their failed conservatorship bid, countered by Dr. Patel's testimony and Sandra Brooks' evidence, had sealed their defeat. Atlanta's society pages, once vicious, now spun a cautious narrative. Harrington's nurse weds billionaire. The black community's rallies had evolved into celebrations, with ex-posts proclaiming that Aisha and Ed had built a new Atlanta. The Thompson-Harrington Foundation, funding clinics and education, was transforming underserved neighborhoods, with its first health center opening that week. The city's divide was mending, a new unity emerging from Aisha's fight. Ed's voice was steady at the altar, and his eyes locked on Aisha's. "This hospital saved me," he said, his vow carrying over the crowd. "But you, Aisha, showed me what matters. Love, purpose, family. I was lost, chasing status, until you saw the real me." Aisha's eyes glistened, her voice soft. "I fell in love twice. First with the man who needed my help, then with the man who fought back to us. Jamal, dapper in a small tuxedo, carried the rings, his grin wide. 'Are we a real family now?' he asked, clutching his basketball card. Ed lifted him, his newfound strength. 'Always have been, son.' The guest list defied Atlanta's norms. Nurses like Linda Carter, orderlies, and Mabel, beaming with pride, mingled with city officials and foundation beneficiaries. A young orderly, now studying nursing thanks to a foundation scholarship, hugged Aisha, tears in his eyes. Even some society figures attended, their curiosity outweighing old prejudices. Aisha welcomed them, and her father's lessons about dignity guided her. "Change happens one heart at a time," she'd told Jamal, who now ran to Ed, calling him Dad easily. The moment, shared on X, sparked thousands of likes. Love crosses all lines. The reception buzzed in the garden, laughter mingling with music. Sandra Brooks arrived with news. Claire's appeal had been denied, and her sentence was final. "The Montgomerys are done," Sandra said, smiling. "Your foundation's the talk of the city." Mayor Jackson toasted, "You've shown us wealth is in character, not cash." Aisha and Ed exchanged glances, their shared vision. A city where care trumped status, taking root. Aisha thought of her Virginia firing, her stand for truth, and saw it echoed in their work. Jamal, showing Ed his latest layup sketch. Asked Dad if he could help with my school play. Ed laughed. That's what dads do. Ed led Aisha to a quiet corner as the sun set, pulling an envelope from his jacket. For you, he said, revealing a deed to the Aisha Thompson Nursing School, set to open next year. Every dreamer deserves a chance, like you gave me. Aisha's eyes filled with tears, and her clinic dream became a legacy. It's too much, she whispered. Ed grinned. Nothing's too much for you. Jamal ran up, waving a playbill. He'd landed the lead in his school play, Ed promising to build sets. Aisha watched them, her heart full, the city's lights a backdrop to their new beginning. Later, as they danced under the stars, Aisha reflected. That first night, when they said you'd never wake, I saw a fighter, she told Ed. Look at us now. Ed smiled, pulling her and Jamal close. Not a fairy tale. Real work, real love. Aisha nodded, thinking of her father's mantra. Truth bends, but it never breaks. The society pages would call her a queen, but Aisha knew the truth. She and Ed had built a world where character, not class, defined worth. As they drove past the hospital, its ICU lights glowing, Aisha knew their love, forged in darkness, would light Atlanta's future, a legacy of resilience and hope.